So we begin with Amalia, right?
Yes.
Okay, Amalia, how did LGDR story begin?
So it's actually, I thought about it this morning. It's almost a year ago, exactly, President Day weekend, that we were together, vacationing together, friends and colleagues for many, many, many years, complaining, sharing complaints, dreams, fantasies, frustrations, post-COVID realizations. And out of these endless conversation during this very special time together, we came to realize that there is so much more to do together, that it's exciting. We get more and more excited by the idea of the four of us, what it adds, what it brings forward. So it was really out of very genuine conversations and sharing, and it was developing in that moment.
Where was it?
Colorado.
Ah, not bad. Okay. So what are your observations about the evolution of the art market before and during the pandemic, Dominique?
I think before the pandemic, we had reached an art market that was wider than ever. There were more and more participants into this art world or art market. It kept surprising us, whether at art fair, whether at exhibition, whether at auction, to see how many new faces were coming to the fabric of the art world. And it was incredibly exciting, but it also had reached a certain speed. And I think we all were a bit tired or drained by this race and speed and run. And COVID hit very strongly because it forced the world to get still. And in our business, stillness was something we had not experienced for a long time. We were jumping from an event to another, an art fair to another, a plane to another, an opening. And that stillness was, although a bit scary at the beginning, when we all learned how to live with it, was quite extraordinary, because we discovered the resilience of the art market. And we discovered how essential, in a way, it was to people's life. And not so much essential in terms of buying and selling and spending, but essential in terms of engagement, in terms of fulfillment, in terms of open-mindedness. And the art world proved to be incredibly agile. The speed with which we were able to turn from within galleries to within Zoom and within virtual art fairs and digital art fairs. And what we felt at the time, and I can only speak for Brett and I because we were daily on the phone, there was an incredible standstill from March, April, May. And by the time the art fair came online, and it was the only online art fair that worked, but by the time it came online, we had turned around and made beautiful digital movies of all the art, and it sold. And from that moment, a new reassurance came. And I think the art market is as strong as it's ever been.
So, but everyone in the team is very independent. So how can it work together as a group?
So this is my question. So, yeah. So one of the things, as you know, I made a choice when I left Christie's to join forces with Dominique, because basically I'm a believer in collaboration. And I think one of the things which we are all, that binds us together, is this notion of collaboration and the sharing of spirit, and actually generosity of spirit amongst each other. Now, it helps that we are friends. It helps that basically this is all built on 20 plus years of friendship amongst us, and we each have different friendships. So again, there's an enrichment in that. So I think the starting point of any kind of partnership has to start with trust. And we are fortunate in the sense that we actually have that as a personal side that actually opens a lot of doors. But one of the terminologies that was used actually in that first meetings that was just described last year was these different terminologies that were sort of shared with us. And one of the terminologies that was shared by both Amalia and Dominique was this notion of a consortium of talent, the bringing together of different individuals' specialities and expertise. And what's exciting for me, and I've seen it actually, you know, we're only January, but as you know, we've been working together and thinking and planning really over a year, and we've seen the proof of this. We've seen actually the impact of the four of us in the way that we're working, either because it's just much more creative and there's a much more dynamic aspect. We're bringing different aspects of our personalities and the different aspects of our histories, because we've all come, you know, we've got a synergy in that we have agreed to work together and there's a friendship, but we all come from different areas of the art market. And the impact of that, and we've seen it directly with artists and the way that they're receiving this and excited by it. And we've seen it directly in the way that we're working with private clients or institutions, where they're getting the best of the four of us and more, because ultimately, to Dominique's point, when we joined, it wasn't 1 + 1 = 2. It was 1 + 1 into multiples, because ultimately that's really what we've created. It's a consortium of incredibly talented individuals whose differences come together and actually create a similarity of focus.
Yeah, but Jeanne, what artists are you going to keep on showing in your galleries?
So it's a great question to follow the one that you just had, because we're all incredibly passionate about artists, and we will build a gallery based on all of our relationships with artists. So I will be very specific. We've opened with the show of Clemente in Paris. Following that will be a Carol Rama show that Mark Godfrey will curate. In New York, in the springtime, you'll see a show of Lisa Bryce, with whom I've worked for many years. And then following that, we'll have Pierre Soulages in Asia. We'll have Pat Steer open in the fall. Marilyn Minter as well, following up in 89th Street. And then Derek Adams will go to Asia. So we're really kind of nurturing our existing artist relationships, and then you will see some surprises, and we'll add some new in. And as well, we're committed to artist projects. So it allows us to work with artists who we've had relationships with, but not necessarily built exhibitions.
But you as a specialist of auction house, obviously, so you propose to be intermediaries between the collector and the auction house. Why will it work?
It's already working. I mean, basically, one of the things which you know, we have always had actually as relationships with our private collectors, and whether it's private collectors or it's institutions, is ultimately people who are making decisions of either wanting to buy it or sell at auction. And they're coming to us because we actually represent a very, very high level of knowledge, obviously, of how auction houses work, and ultimately how best, first of all, to have that relationship. We have obviously incredible relationships with all three auction houses, all four, you know, multiple auction houses. But it's basically understanding that the world has, you know, we're dealing with one holistic world in terms of the art world. Auction, art fair, galleries, dealers, they are all one in terms of the private collector. And our job, and we've obviously bring great expertise here, is how do we, first of all, get the best for the client out of an auction house? So whether it's a deal that, you know, it's a consignment, and how do they get the best from that deal? Or if they're buying something, how best to basically purchase the work. So because of the, you know, 28 plus years of being in these auction houses, we have incredible deep knowledge. And the auction world has also become much more complex. We're dealing obviously with new elements, the NFT world, all these different things which create excitement and dynamism, but with it comes confusion. So if you
it's also added value to the artists. There is a very short distance now between primary and secondary work, and oftentimes the artists with whom we work jump into auction right away, and that can be very destabilizing to the market and to what we're trying to achieve. And so to have Brett, who is constantly, in fact, on the phones with experts at the auction houses, he has kind of a knowledge base of what might be upcoming, of how to advise the auction houses in terms of maybe putting a lower estimate than a higher estimate. And then we have the ability to, and we have the time to maybe go out and to find either a guarantor or the right types of collectors to go after that piece. So it's actually, it's not just for a collector anymore. It's really something that I'm very interested in working with Brett, with artists.
Oh,
But
very interesting.
we've always done that with artists. It's such a great point that Jeanne brings. But I also want to say that it's not even for collectors. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've been involved working with institutions, with estate, one picture, a lot of picture, a sale scattered over 2 or 3 years in 5 locations, and collectors and actually their advisors have found very strong added value. It's a big part of our existing business and our becoming business.
And what do you think of the level of prices today in the art market?
The prices. Well, I think, the market is obviously incredibly strong. And one of the things which we've been very surprised by.
The level, huh?
I know, as I'm getting to. One of the things that we've been very surprised by is ultimately that where, and Dominique, I think, mentioned, when we saw 2020 and really everything basically coming to a grinding halt between March and June and the first kinds of auctions and the sort of coming back to the market, there was a belief that the market, or at least there was a hope by many collectors that the market had been reduced by 40%. And we were getting phone calls by collectors saying, I'm interested in buying, but it has to be 40% off. There was nothing to buy at that level, frankly. What we've seen instead is this continual growth, but the art market is not one art market. You're dealing with multiple strains of different kind of focuses. And I think where we see, very strong growth and very strong positivity has been actually when we saw the results of, say, for instance, the Maclo sale, or, great post-war and early Impressionist and 20th century art, and art basically fulfilling its function, i.e. Achieving very strong results, very deep bidding, and ultimately levels which are record prices. Now that is a continuum. That's basically matching rarity to great quality and provenance and all the things that basically come with collections. Where we're more worried, and I think this is where the market generally is, actually the jumping on the fashionable, the wet paint, what we've seen mostly happening in Asia, where there is this, artists who are young 27-year-olds suddenly going for millions of dollars. Okay, without.
And Dominique, I keep on with you about how do you consider the evolution of Paris?
Paris is my favorite city in the world, so it's not an objective question. But I feel that, Paris was always at the heart of a creative energy, and it lost that for a while. And I think it's completely back. Artists are back, French artists, museums are doing an extraordinary work, galleries are doing an extraordinary work. But above that, you really have a developing collecting population. And I think that people from Rome, Madrid, Düsseldorf will come faster to Paris than they go to London.
What about London? Because you have a gallery in London.
Yes, and we'll continue to do maybe less exhibition. We'll consider London sometimes more like a salon with punctual projects and exhibition when it's relevant. But London has taken a place by itself, an insular, isolated place, and will be there because it is still a very important city. But we feel that Paris has taken the lead, and that Paris is very much the flag of what we want to do in Europe.
And now there's design.
Yes.
So what's going on with design?
Well, so design, when you come to visit us on 89th Street, you'll see that design is really embedded in the entire building. It punctuates the full experience. So I have independently had a design business that I have been growing, and I'm really thrilled to have partners now to think of it and really look at it. But I believe in any object that has charisma, and to consider it as having value. And so even though design is all about functionality, if it doesn't function, it's probably not good design. But it's still something that I really believe in, and many collectors you know, they have very sophisticated collections. They should also have sophisticated furniture around them.
So
And
what will be the next big evolution in the art market overall, Dominique? What's your feeling?
I think it will just continue to widen and broaden, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a correction in the next 12 to 36 months. There's been an incredible hype. There's been a lot of liquidity with interest rates that have been very low. As you've all seen, interest rates are rising. There are some political and economical concerns in the world. And I wouldn't be surprised if what I would call the firework of particularly very young wet art stabilizes. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some overpriced or overpurchased works coming back to the market and shaking a bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see a volatility towards a stabilization. We can't be the only market that doesn't have a correction or how do you say that? You know, a sort of
A recalibration.
a recalibration. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Last question. To all of you, what advice you always give to your clients about art?
We all have a different answer, so you'll hear the five of us. But my answer is that collecting is a beautiful journey that enriches your life if you do it with joy. And that's really the advice to me, is embrace the journey.
Surround yourself with knowledge and expertise, which I feel we are as our consortium talk about a lot and try to take that advice in everything we do and in every conversation we have.
Brett?
Stretch for quality. I think, you know, we often find, especially in times where there's, you know, opportunity and whatever, you know, collectors often will go for not necessarily they'll go for the name, but not necessarily the quality within that. And I think, you know, our strongest advice for any collector is really, you know, buy within your, obviously what you can afford, but buy at the top of what that is. And so that notion of stretching is something which we've seen less and less. You know, I think what we've seen over the last year, you know, I always give the example that it becomes more and more difficult for people to fall in love when they're not in front of the work of art. But stretching and understanding that you only have one opportunity here. These things, you know, these are incredibly rare objects.
And Jeanne always tells one thing that I love, and because we've lost her, I want to say it because it really each time excites me. She says to the client, a collection tells a story. So let's tell a story so that it really is your individual joy, taste, capability, time, curiosity. And this idea of telling a story, I think, is a beautiful advice.
Bon, merci beaucoup.